Welcome to Why You're Losing Erections and How to Fix It Immediately. So, if you lose an erection and you don't understand why it happened, the next time you go into the bedroom, you'll be worrying about whether or not you're going to lose it again. And so, every time you lose an erection, it's very important to look back and understand the cause and effect of why it happened. So, in this video, you will be able to understand why you're losing erections and hopefully how to fix them. So in this video, we're going to go over the 4 types of causes of losing an erection. It's a little wordy and weird, but that's correct. We're going to talk about how each of one of these kill erections, and then we're going to talk about how to deal with it. So this is part 2 of a 5-part masterclass. So I'm going to link the first part up here if you haven't watched it. So definitely check that out. Okay, so the 4 types of causes are obvious, beliefs, circumstances, and subtle. So the obvious causes are obvious. Alcohol. Most of you already understand that drinking alcohol will make you lose an erection. There's 2 ways to deal with this particular one. Either drink less alcohol or don't try to have sex when you're too drunk. Pretty simple, but if you lose an erection and you've been drinking the night before and you drank a lot, chances are it's probably that, so you don't need to worry about it. Medications. A lot of medications have side effects. So if you're on medications and you've been struggling with your erection quality, then just Google your medication and erectile dysfunction and side effects, and you'll see if anything comes up. If you do have one of these, then you want to talk to your doctor and see if there's an alternative. A lot of medications have alternatives that have different side effects, different mechanisms of action. So you can oftentimes find ways around this and still stay on medications that you need. Partner is too attractive. This is one a lot of guys know about, but it's basically the answer to this one is oftentimes that you need to form a deeper emotional connection with them, because oftentimes if the person is too attractive and the entirety of the relationship is built on sex, then you oftentimes just feel uncomfortable. But if the person likes you and cares about you and you've known them for a little while, oftentimes then it'll help you feel less nervous. I'm not going to pretend that this one will totally make your anxiety go away, because really attractive women, guys tend to value them a lot, and so that tends to make them, a little bit more nervous. But there's also nervousness and excitement oftentimes share a very similar feeling, so it might also be there's some excitement in there, and it's not just anxiety. But you can lose an erection with somebody because you're too attracted to them, which sounds really counterintuitive. So if you lose an erection with someone and they're very attractive and you look back, try and notice if that made you feel nervous. The next one is not enough emotional connection. This one's kind of similar, but a lot of guys need more emotional connection than they think. So especially with one-night stands, if you lose an erection on a one-night stand, a lot of time what's happening is that just too much of the relationship was based on sex. So you put pressure on yourself to perform, and then you didn't have the emotional connection, which is often something that's arousing to guys. And so those things together sort of, cause you to lose it. So these ones, the answer I always give guys don't like, which is don't have one night stands. I don't have a moral issue with one night stands. I just think if you run into this problem and it happens when you try to have sex with somebody that you don't know, then you can use your mind and just play it forward. Like every single time you try and have sex with somebody and you're going to lose your erection, just stop doing it, because it's just hurting your confidence. It's making you feel worse. And even if you don't like it, just understand that the circumstances that you can enjoy sex in are different than that. So, try and form more emotional connections, and it'll make your sex life a lot better, and you'll be a lot happier. Okay, so the next type of cause is not enough attraction. This is a very interesting one as well that guys discount, because they think, I should be able to get hard with anybody for any reason. I should be able to have sex with this troll I found under a bed, and my erection should be perfect. Otherwise, I'm broken. And in actuality, most guys run into problems with not being attracted to the girl they're having sex with, especially if they are doing one-night stands and stuff like that. And so if you run into problems where you lose an erection, just ask yourself, because if you're not aroused, you're not going to get hard. And so there's different things that you can not be attracted to. So for example, you can be with a girl who's really hot, but you don't like her personality. And if you're a guy that personality is arousing to you, you might not be attracted to her even though she's very attractive. So this is one of those things that, like, it's just worth, like, if you lose an erection, look at the situation, especially if it's with somebody that you don't know. Okay, so the next one is, the next thing we're talking about is belief-related causes. So these are, in my experience, these are the most powerful killers of erections. And there's some that are universally shared by a lot of guys, which those are the ones I'm going to go over. There are also ones that are much more subtle and person dependent, because beliefs tend to come from the life that we've lived. So you'll have beliefs about relationships and sex based on your parents, based on movies that you've watched, based on experiences with girlfriends that you've had, stuff like that. And so we'll talk about the big ones, but in my coaching program, what I do mostly with guys at the very beginning is try and isolate the beliefs that are causing problems, because most guys, if you clear out a couple of really big beliefs that are causing problems, they can get erections back. And so hopefully these ones on their own will allow you to fix it. Beliefs are also really interesting in that they're sort of like an invisible cage. So they're things that you believe are true so that you don't even question them. And so you just sort of go through life believing them, and they oftentimes just kill erections in that way. Okay, so belief is something that's often not true or circumstantially true that causes you pressure to perform. And so this is the pressure to perform part is very important, because oftentimes what beliefs do is they create an imaginary circumstance where something bad happens. And so you put pressure on yourself so that that imaginary bad thing doesn't happen. And so it's also good to note that that imaginary bad thing could have actually happened. And so, like, you may have lost an erection and a girl made fun of you. And so you think that every girl would make fun of you. And so, there's just stuff like that. Okay, so basically we want to resolve these by recognizing that there's a partial truth in them and also seeing the parts that aren't true. The next thing is that we have to recognize the actual impact the belief is having on our life, so we can see that we have to change it, and then we have to adopt a more mature perspective on the situation and oftentimes make some changes. So the first one is the belief that women value sex as much as I do. So this one is a very, very sticky one for guys. It's very hard for them to understand this. So the truth is that they don't. They have on-demand access to sex whenever they want, and that makes them value it completely different. But the consequences of this are that it adds a lot of pressure for guys to be great in bed. Like most guys that I end up coaching, they want to be like the best that their girls ever had, and they think if they're not, then they're not like a man. So it also creates worries about size, because they want to be the best ever, then they have to be huge. It creates pressure to have sex when you aren't in the mood, which this is something we're going to discuss later, so it's very important. But the most important one is it causes guys to fixate on sex and ignore things that are more likely to create a healthy relationship. So an example of this is if you fixate on, I have to be the best ever, and I have anxiety, and I put pressure on myself, and I lose erections, and I'm worried she's going to break up with me because of that. Chances are that you're going to spend a lot of time like worrying and watching Netflix and paying attention to your phone when you could be hanging out with her and listening to her. And the thing is that women cheat for different reasons than men. Men can be in a perfectly happy relationship and have a very attractive woman come up to them, and the men will have sex with them. Women tend to cheat for emotional reasons more often than not. So if a woman is cheating, it's because some sort of emotional need is not being filled in her relationship. And so women tend to find a way to get that emotional need met. And oftentimes wherever that emotional need is met is also where sex goes. So they tend to cheat with the person who's fulfilling the emotional need. So the worst thing that you can do in a relationship is like basically ignore one of their needs, worrying about something that you think they care about that they don't. So basically women, they do enjoy sex. Like, don't get me wrong. Don't think that I'm under some sort of like false pretense that women don't enjoy sex. They absolutely do. But the thing is that sex is easy for women to get. They have access to Tinder and Bumble and bars and coffee shops and literally any restaurant that they've ever walked into. They get hit on all the time. And you don't get hit on all the time, which is why you value sex so much more than they do. So think about like your favorite restaurant. Now imagine that every time you went down at a meal, somebody walked over and handed you the meal that you like at your favorite restaurant, and you had that option at every single meal. You would value it so much more than you do right now because you have on-demand access to it. So this is how women are with sex. But you have to understand that what women value in sex is also very important, or in a relationship is important. And what they value is you. Guys screw this up, and we'll talk about this in one of the later ones, but basically they value you, they value your personality, they value the way that you make them laugh, they value spending time with them, listening to them, providing for them. And so what does this mean practically? What it means is that for women, generally speaking, if the sex is decent, if it's good, and you meet their emotional needs, they will stay with you forever. But let me tell you something. You guys fantasize about being the best person they've ever had sex with. They're not dating that person. Because if they have great sex with someone, but that person doesn't meet their needs, understand, women's sex with women tends to follow where their emotional needs are met. If they're getting their great sex, but they're not getting their emotional needs, they'll find somebody that meets their emotional needs, and then they'll start having sex with them. So what they value is different than what you value. And this is important because right now you put a lot of pressure on yourself to perform. And so one of the best ways to deal with this is just ask what she values in a relationship. And this is the other part that's really, really important. You have to believe her when she tells you what's important. Because a lot of guys, they'll actually ask this question and then they'll be like, yeah, but she's just not saying sex because our sex life isn't amazing. She's telling you what she wants. Okay, some women might lie about it, but you can't control that. You need to work off of the information that you have. But for most of you out there, if you talk to your girl about what's important to her in a relationship and you make sure that that's taken care of, there's a very high likelihood that your relationship will be healthy. And then you also have to tell her about what's important to you and talk to her about that so that both of your needs are met. But don't put more pressure on yourself about sex when she doesn't care as much as you think she does. So this one's related, but the belief is if she finds out about your performance anxiety, she'll think you aren't a real man or she'll end the relationship. And the reality of this is that she would love to help you with this problem. For most of you, if you told your girl, she would be so happy to help you. And also the experience that you're going to have of telling her, and this is a quote from one of my clients, is when I told her, she basically reacted as if I just told her that I had salmon for lunch. And he was so shocked by that reaction, but it's a very common one. Like, you think about this problem all the time. She doesn't think about it at all. So, of course, to you, it's a really big deal, and to her, it's not. So, this one also causes a lot of problems. So, basically, it causes you to not talk to her because you're constantly, it causes you to be worried that she's going to find out because you haven't talked to her about it. So that adds pressure for you to perform, and it can cause you to lose an erection. So if she doesn't actually know, it also adds pressure for you to stay hard every time because you know that one slip up will cause her to find out. If she does know, but you don't talk to her about it, it's going to trigger her insecurities, which is going to make your relationship worse. Because think about it. If you're losing an erection and you're not telling her why, she is going to assume whatever the thing about herself that she's insecure about is the reason that you're not attracted to her and you're losing your erection. She's going to be like, oh my God, it's my thunder thighs or my flat butt or my too big butt or the dimple that I have that doesn't match the others. Whatever the thing is, that's what she's going to assume is going on. And that's going to make things worse. Or if she does know, she's going to know something is bothering you and you're not talking to her about it. And that is actually the type of thing that will put your relationship in jeopardy because you're not opening up to her about something, which means that there's going to be an emotional wall, which means that you're not taking care of her emotional needs. She's not going to feel connected to you. So she's going to find somebody else who will feel connected to her, and then that's where sex will follow. So it's really interesting problem that guys run into where they think if I tell her about this problem, she'll break up with me. But in actuality, what tends to happen is not talking to her about the problem tends to increase the chances of her breaking up with you, not telling her about it. And this is a very, very strange one for guys to have conversations about because it's just so backwards of what they think. I remember the first time that I told a woman that I had erectile dysfunction, and I was like waiting for like the ridicule or like the shame, and she was so sweet about it. Like my wife, when I told her, it was amazing. Like I could not have imagined the reaction that I got from her. She was so supportive and caring and nurturing. And like my wife loves that she helped me get past this problem. So the best answer to this one is to just talk to her about it. It makes you feel better because you won't have to worry about her finding out. She'll be on board. She'll help you. And so if you're losing erections because of this, it's such a simple fix. Okay, so the next one is you should get hard immediately from no stimulation whatsoever, and you should stay hard forever. So I'm a little bit tongue-in-cheek on this one, but like a lot of guys believe ridiculous things. They think that they should get hard in a lot of situations where it's not reasonable, and they think that they should stay hard under every circumstance. And in actuality, like it takes longer for you to get hard than you think. It requires more stimulation than you think. And it's easier for every guy to lose an erection than they think. And this is all natural. You make a big deal out of it because you just don't understand what's going on. And so if you lose an erection, what you want to do is you want to look back and say, okay, first of all, was it reasonable for me to get hard? Was there enough stimulation that I should have stayed hard? And did it go away because stimulation went away? So the bad consequences of this belief causes you to freak out when nothing is wrong. I cannot express this more like enough. A lot of times that you're freaking out, nothing is wrong. You have the wrong expectation and you're impatient, which is this one. Impatience also creates you to lose erections because oftentimes what happens with impatience is what you're actually doing is you're triggering fight or flight. Fight or flight triggers impatience because things oftentimes need to be done immediately in stressful situations. And so oftentimes you like go into this mode where you get impatient. What's actually happening is that you're afraid. And so that will cause you to lose an erection. So the next one is it moves your attention from something that's sexual to something that's not. So if you are thinking, man, I should be hard, that's not an arousing thought. And it's not something that you couldn't get hard from that thought. So by putting your attention on it, you're actually creating the circumstances where your erections are going to go away. So the best answer to this is often to just slow down and be patient and wait like 5 minutes and like continue doing stimulating things and you'll often get hard. And the more that you can see that it takes longer, like actually experience that it takes longer than you think and like it's easy to get back and things like that, this kind of belief is actually a very easy one to deal with. The next one is beliefs about size, which I'm not going to go into because I made a video. So I'm going to link the video up here in the corner, but I made an entire video about this and the anxieties relating to it and how to deal with it. It's a really old problem that men have been having. And I talk about a 2,500-year-old solution to it. The next one is a belief that we should have sex every day. And this one's really interesting. Basically, the truth is that after the honeymoon period, very few people want to have sex every day. So this causes bad consequences because it drains you sexually. And so if you're a guy who's like, energy is woo-woo, just think about after sex, like how much you want to get up and like go for a run. Like you literally are drained. So there is definitely sexual energy and having sex too often can drain it. But just from a logical standpoint, like sex takes effort. You know, it's a big effortful experience and it does have a big impact on your nervous system when you have an orgasm. So it drains you, which the more drained you are, the less enthusiastic and more difficult it is to get an erection. Like think about a period of time where you were just like working really hard. Chances are you were less sexual. So that's just how things work. So sometimes if you're losing erections, if you're having sex too frequently, that's actually just the cause. So the next thing is frequent okay sex instead of great less often sex. So having quality instead of quantity instead of quality, like focusing on like it's really important that we have sex every day. It creates pressure. It creates worse sex. But the weird thing about this one is that if your sex that you're having is just okay, by nature, you're going to be less aroused. It's going to be less stimulating, less exciting, which means it's going to be harder for you to get and maintain an erection. So if you think about, if you went a year without having sex, and then like you were with somebody and you really were turned on, you really wanted to have sex with them, you're going to have much better sex in that period than you would if you had sex with that person every day for a year. On day 365, that's not going to be the best sex that you've had. And if you want to test this, go a week without, or go a month without an orgasm, or even a week, and then masturbate or have sex and see if that was better than the last time you did it. It will be, just because, you know, the time where you're going to enjoy eating the most is when you're hungry. The worst time to try and sell someone a meal is if they've had a steak, you know, they just had a big meal. So, you know, if you're having sex all the time, it actually lowers your sex drive. So it can actually cause you to lose an erection. So it can cause you to have sex when you don't actually want to. So if you're not in the mood, which I'm going to kind of talk about this one next as well, but if you're not in the mood, you're less likely to get aroused. And if you're less likely to get aroused, it's more likely that it's going to be easier for you to lose an erection. And if you lose an erection, because you had sex when you weren't in the mood, it's also more likely that you're going to lose an erection in the future, because then you're going to be worrying about why you lost an erection. So like, look back and ask yourself, like, was I actually in the mood? And so for this one, honestly, it just comes down to self-honesty. Be honest with yourself about your needs. Talk to your partner about their needs. Have communication. How often should we have sex? How often do you want to have sex? How often do I want to have sex? And it doesn't mean like, okay, like clockwork 2 times a week, but like, if she wants to have sex 3 times a week and you want to have sex once a week, you need to find some sort of compromise. But you might figure out that both of you want to have sex at a very similar interval, and it's just easy. When I first met my wife, after a period of time, we both figured out that we were having sex and we didn't really want to, because we thought the other person wanted to. And so it was definitely like draining both of us. Okay, so the next type is going to be circumstances related causes. So things that are relating to the circumstances. And I apologize, my wordiness is weird, but like, this is what this really is. So circumstance related causes, the first one is basically read the room. And this one relates to what we talked about before, but it relates to something called the arousal cycle. So in a healthy sexual situation, you are going to get turned on, and your partner is going to get turned on to a degree, and your partner being turned on should be arousing for you, and you being turned on should be arousing for your partner. So basically, the more you get turned on, the more they get turned on. The more they get turned on, the more you get turned on. And so if either of you is not in the mood to have sex, not like neutral, but like is really not in the mood to have sex, it's a bad idea to do it, because you're going to mess up the arousal cycle. So sometimes you'll lose an erection because your partner wasn't in the mood and you tried to have sex anyway, and you try to like get them in the mood. And because they were not reciprocating, they weren't giving you that, their arousal level wasn't increasing. It can actually cause you to lose an erection, because they're oftentimes not only not arousing you, but they're going to behave in ways that are not arousing, like the opposite of arousing, like boner killing. And so oftentimes this can happen. So just in general, ways to deal with this is if both of you are neutral, also not a good idea. One of you needs to be in the mood. So if at least one of you is in the mood and the other one's neutral, then sex is okay. Okay, so the next one is condoms. I made a full video about this. I'll link up here, but I'll run through it really quickly because this one's easy. Condoms should be reachable from when you're laying in the bed. Make sure your condoms fit your girth and your length. Be able to put a condom on with your eyes closed in less than 5 seconds. And after a condom goes on, you can still stimulate yourself before penetration. Super easy to deal with. I made a short video. If you have problems with this, watch it. Okay, the next one is being tired or not in the mood, or your head is still at work. So these are all kind of related, and they relate to what we talked about before with the arousal cycle. But I went over it again because the reason I wanted to emphasize this part is that if you're not in the mood for some reason, your head's somewhere else, you have to not have sex, because this has bad consequences. Because if you try to have sex when you're not in the mood, and you lose an erection, what ends up happening is that you're making it harder the next time you try and have sex, because you're going to be like, oh no, am I going to get hard that time? And so you have a bad sexual experience, and you make your next sexual experience worse. And a lot of guys just haven't realized that they can say no. Like they're so used to being in sex, like sex deprived, that any opportunity that they get to have sex, they feel like they have to. But if you're not in the mood, it's better for you because one, you'll feel more confident in yourself that you can say no. Two, you'll trust yourself more because you understand that when you're not in the mood, you don't have to try, and therefore you'll also understand that when you do have sex, your likelihood is going to be better because you're going to only choose times where it's advantageous, where you're more likely to stay hard. So this one's a really big one, and it's so hard for guys to say no. I understand, but like if you lost an erection, look back and see like, was I actually in the mood? And think about if you'd said no and then what the next sexual experience would have been like. Chances are that would get better. So just being able to say no on its own will lower your sexual anxiety. Okay. Subtle causes. So the first one is recent breakup, emotionally charged situation. So a lot of guys lose an erection for the first time within like a few months of like a difficult breakup. So like the end of a marriage or like a really long relationship or a bad breakup. And the thing that really happens here is that guys are discounting the amount of emotion that's related to getting hard. So for a lot of guys that are struggling with this kind of problem, one of the things that they're missing is that one of their main arousal mechanisms is emotional connection. And so if you're still hurt or upset over your ex, even if you don't think you are, that can actually cause you to lose an erection. So if you've lost an erection, within 6 to 12 months after a breakup, honestly, I would chalk it up to that. And it's not just breakups. So it's also things like if you lost your job or somebody that you cared about died, or like anything that's like really emotionally charged that kind of like hurts your emotions. Or if you're not somebody who's super in touch with your emotions, something that might make other people's emotions hurt, then that can actually really, really mess with erection quality. And so with this one, the best answer is just time. And then the next one is sexual trauma. So I'm not going to get too deep into this because it's a really complex topic. It's something I personally dealt with. I had very severe sexual trauma, and I can tell you is that I didn't know I had sexual trauma, and it was definitely messing with sex every time that I had it. One of the main clues, a couple clues would be, did you start masturbating at a young age? During sexual situations, is there part of you that wants the experience to be over? And then basically like just anxiety during sex on its own can be a sign of that. Doesn't mean everybody who has anxiety has that, but like you can Google what the signs of having been sexually abused are, or if you just know, the answer to this is that you need professional help. Like there's no shortcut to this, but I definitely lost erections in situations where I didn't feel safe. And it was because of something that I didn't realize that I was still experiencing that had happened when I was very, very young. So, most of you probably have not been sexually abused, but it's a thing that you need to know exists if you are losing erections, especially consistently, or you might want to investigate, or if you know you had sexual trauma, definitely get professional help. Okay, you don't understand what actually turns you on. This is a really, really, really common one, especially for guys who have had a history of porn. So this one got me really bad. If you are a guy who struggled with porn, there's a chance that you think, especially if you think you're more visually stimulated, like you're really fixated on finding a girl with like a really nice ass and really nice boobs. I would investigate whether or not your turn-ons, like experiences where you actually get erections, are more tied to emotional experiences. So for me, my main one was that I'm very turned on by emotional connection. Not all guys are, but I was, and I am, and I did not understand this for a very long time. And so this one's a killer because if you don't have an element in a sexual situation that you need, like something that turns you on isn't there, and you think something else turns you on, but it actually doesn't, it's kind of like a double whammy. You're missing something you need, and you're focused on something you don't need, and then you're oftentimes going to shame yourself about not getting hard for that thing. And so the antidote to this one has some really bad consequences. You're missing something that you need. You're focused on something you think will turn you on that doesn't, and then the shame and guilt also makes it worse. And this one, the antidote to it is to pay attention in sexual situations a lot more closely. So what actually turns you on, like what actually gives you an erection, like the more clearly you can understand, why am I hard right now? Or why am I not hard? What do I need? The easier this one gets. And once you get this one really clear, it's amazing. So it just makes it so that you can not have to try, and you get turned on and aroused and enjoy sex way more. So definitely this is one to investigate if you're losing erections, and none of the other ones have made sense. Okay, so the next one is emotional state, which is similar to mood, which we've talked about a few times. But the thing that I want to emphasize is that not all of your emotional states are good for erections. And the wrong emotional state can kill your erections. And this one I can't give you answers to, because like about specifics, because everyone's different. For example, it's a trope in movies that like a couple will be fighting and yelling at each other, and then all of a sudden they're both turned on and they have sex. I personally can't do that. When I'm angry, I hate everyone, and I don't want to have sex. And so different emotional states are difficult for different people. And so one of the things that you want to reflect on anytime you lose an erection is like, what was my emotional state? Like, was I sad? Was I frustrated? And then like, think about, have you had times in the past where you were where you were in that emotional state? Were you able to get hard? Because it could just be that it was the wrong emotional state. The next one is guilt from past experiences. This is another one that got me. If you've ever used sex as a weapon against someone, or like if you're with your spouse and you've cheated on them, there's a chance that you feel guilty about it. And there's a lot of different ways that this one can happen. But the answer to these ones, and I've had a lot of these come up with clients, is that you just have to do the right thing to resolve the situation, be a man, and take your licks. For me, I lost a very close friendship over my behavior and something that I did, and I felt guilty for a very long time. And I had to be a man and sack up and lose the relationship. And, it helped me with the situation. And for you, it's going to be a personal decision about whether or not it's worth you being able to get your sex life back, if that is the main cause. I would say that this should be one of your last things that you look at. So if you've gone through this whole video and you're like, none of those make sense, but you have one of those things that you feel guilty about, then move forward. But this is one of those ones that's really difficult, and a lot of guys, it's not worth for them making amends. But so hopefully you've been able to find some and understand like reasons that you've lost erections in the past. And if you recently lost an erection, hopefully there's something in this video helped. If it didn't and you would like some help, you can go to my website or click the link down below, and you can get some one-on-one help from me. And also, this is part 2 of a 5-part series, so I'll see you in part 3, which is about using the causes that we talked about to analyze past sexual situations. See you in the next video.